All right, let's take a look at Philippians chapter 1, verses 3 to 6. It says this: I thank my God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. Be confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. The first thing that I want to observe is just the joy and gratitude and confidence with which Paul speaks. He's talking about how he's remembering them and praying for them. He says, I always thank my God every time I remember you. I always pray with joy. I'm confident of this. And so, what I want to ask is just what is the reason for Paul's gratitude? What is the reason for his joy? What is the reason for his confidence? I think I see kind of two answers. The first one it says is because of your partnership in the gospel, and then the second one we'll see is this confidence in what God is doing. So, what does it mean about this partnership in the gospel? So, first, a couple of questions, a couple of words to look at. What is the gospel? And the gospel is just the good news of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, right? It's what Jesus has done in the world. And so, one way to read this partnership in the gospel is to understand that Paul is on a mission to proclaim the gospel, to share the gospel. And so partnership in the gospel means that the Philippians are supporting Paul in this ministry, either through they themselves also preaching and proclaiming the gospel in their context, or maybe even specifically in somehow supporting Paul, providing him with the things that he needs. We're going to find out he's in prison. And so, like, while he's in prison, what kind of things does he need? Or praying for him as he proclaims the gospel. So I think that's a very valid way of reading this is because you're supporting me. You guys are we're co-workers in this. You're helping me out, and I that gives me joy. And from the first day until now. In other words, it is ongoing support. There's another way to read this, and it hinges on how this word partnership gets translated. It's the Greek word koinonia, and it can also mean participation or fellowship. And so what this could mean is like your participation in the gospel, your participation in the life, death, resurrection. We see elsewhere Paul has a big theme of union with Christ, being like, hey, you have died with Christ and you have raised with Christ. You now live with Christ. So that also could be a part of it. Paul uses this word koinonia to other places. In Philippians chapter 2, verse 1, he says, hey, if anybody has any common sharing in the Spirit, that's not necessarily partnership with the Spirit. That is fellowship with the Spirit, participation with the Spirit, some kind of um, experiencing what the Spirit is doing in your midst. Another place he uses this is in chapter 3, verse 10. He says, "I want to know the power of the resurrection and participation in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death." So this is like Jesus in his life, he suffered and he died, and Paul sees himself. He wants to know the power of the resurrection. He wants to participate in that, you might say. And he also says, so that means I'm also participating in his sufferings and becoming like him, actually, even in his death. So again, this is the same word, koinonia, but it has a participation. I think both translations are possible. This is the NIV. I think the NASB has participation. And I think they're related, right? Because we have received the gospel and by faith we participate with Jesus in his death, his life, death, and resurrection, um, then we then participate, we partner then in actually the work of Jesus, which part of that is the proclamation and sharing the good news of Jesus. So I think both are possible there. Okay, let's take a look at the next phrase. It says, being confident of this, that he who began a good of work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. So Paul's confidence is his joy is in what they're doing, one reason, and then the other thing is that he is confident in what God is doing. That's God. So he's not just confident or joyful in what the Philippians are doing in their partnership participation in the gospel, but that sort of hinges on the fact that God is working within the Philippian church, within the Philippian believers. And there's this time component to it. So he says, I'm confident of this because he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. So we've got began a good work, right? You received the gospel, you believed. Um, so there's this work that it's from God. God initiated. God is the one who began this good work. and then it will carry on. So there's this will carry is a future tense, but it's this idea of this ongoing action, and the action is going to be ongoing until some endpoint, and the endpoint isn't until the day of Christ Jesus, at which point whatever the work was began will reach its completion. I do think the day of Christ Jesus here probably refers to the day that Jesus returns, the day of Jesus' revelation. And I think we see that elsewhere in Paul, and I think we'll see that elsewhere in Philippians as well. Now, the last thing I just want to point out here is Paul is writing to a church. So when he says the good work in you, I think first and foremost, he's talking to the Philippians as a church. I've translated these y'all because we don't have a second person plural unless you take like what unless you take like a y'all, right? Y'all is a second person, so plural. So it's not just you singularly, it's you together as a church. So it's I remember all of you. Uh, prayers for all y'all because y'all partner you together as a church are partnering with me. And the good work then, I don't think becomes just singular. I think it's good work in everybody within the Philippian or within the community of the Philippian church. And I do think you can take this and then extrapolate that both sort of up and down. I guess by up I mean more broadly. So God is also doing a work in the church universal, in the church as the whole community of believers throughout time, throughout the world, not just it doesn't only apply to Philippian church. And I think it also then applies sort of down or more individualistically to the person, right? God is also at work in individuals, and he is carrying that on. The reason why I think we can apply this in multiple directions is because the confidence is in the God who works, and God is obviously at work in all of those areas, and he is bringing things to completion. This, of course, doesn't mean we're going to make it to the day of Christ Jesus. I think that what it means is we're supposed to be looking at here sort of the cosmic scope of God's work. It reaches its fulfillment, conclusion in the day of Christ Jesus, and God's going to bring it all to completion, and we participate in that through the gospel, and then hopefully we'll participate in sharing the gospel as well. So that's what I want us to think about today, and just offer a minute of reflection, and just to ask, how do you see God working in you, in your local church, and in the church worldwide? And that can be a reason for confidence and joy and hope as you look and say, like, hey, God is beginning a work, and we can see the way that God begins certain works. And because of that, we can be sure, because God is faithful, that he will carry those works on to completion for his purposes. And we can be joyful and have gratitude in that. All right, thanks for watching. And hey, let me know if you have any thoughts or feedback or questions or specific things you'd like me to address, areas you'd like me to go next, or particularly questions you have from this text. Love to hear from you. Thanks. Bye.